Welcome everyone to Bitcoin Masterclass Module 3. How does Bitcoin work? If you're anything like me, if you're going to invest in something, you want to really understand how it's working. You don't want something to just be a black box that you're not certain exactly how it works. This module is going to be a little more technical, but I still think it's really approachable information for just about anybody. I've tried to present it in such a way that most people will be able to understand exactly what's going on when you're talking about how does the Bitcoin network actually function? How does this decentralized blockchain actually work? So let us dive into that. What are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about all the Bitcoin terms, things you may have heard previously, like the Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin token, or the coin itself, ledger, miner, wallet. We're going to talk about what all those things mean so that you have a working definition for all these terms and you understand exactly what's being said when people use those terms. We're going to talk about specifically Bitcoin, the asset, after we talk about how the network and all of its pieces work together. Then we're going to talk about how all of these pieces fit together. We're going to go through an example of what happens when a Bitcoin transaction is taking place so that you can see how all the machinery works behind the scenes. And then lastly, we're going to talk about exchanges, because if you're interested in Bitcoin, you have to have a way to move your fiat money and exchange it for Bitcoin. So we're going to talk about how you would go about doing that as well. So first off, the Bitcoin network. Like any computer network, Bitcoin is a group of connected computers working together. At this point, it involves millions of computers, which is great. Now, the purpose of this network is to do everything necessary to maintain the Bitcoin ledger. And another name for that Bitcoin ledger is the blockchain. It's a chain of blocks of transactions, and we'll get more to that later. But so the Bitcoin ledger, which is exactly what a ledger says, a recording of all of the different accounts that own Bitcoin, that's the blockchain. And the purpose of the Bitcoin network is to maintain that ledger so that everyone at any given moment knows exactly how much Bitcoin they own if they're participating. A computer network always has a purpose of some kind. Usually it's a company that all their computers are on a network together so they can work together. The Bitcoin network is purely trying to maintain this Bitcoin, the Bitcoin ledger, and process the Bitcoin transactions. So things that you have to be able to do to maintain the ledger is track account balances. You have to be able to process the transactions that people want to make, and you have to be able to provide security. So if you had a paper ledger or an electronic ledger at a bank, you would keep that under high security so that no one could come in and move numbers around, change account balances. Exact same thing with the Bitcoin network. It has to be secure. It has to be something that no one can tinker with or modify or otherwise try to manipulate. The Bitcoin ledger or blockchain tracks the location of every single Bitcoin in existence. Okay, it knows where every single one is because Bitcoin only exists on the Bitcoin network. Okay, so again, to recap, Bitcoin network is all of the computers that are contributing to the system, to the Bitcoin system, in order to maintain the Bitcoin ledger that tells exactly where all the Bitcoin in existence are, who owns how many Bitcoin. So there's some pieces here we want to talk about. Let's break the Bitcoin network down into various components. So you've probably heard the term Bitcoin miner before, but what is a Bitcoin miner? A Bitcoin miner is a computer that processes transactions and secures the network. There are other lower level computers that do a little bit less functionality that are on the Bitcoin network, but the big ones are the miners. They are processing transactions. They are doing a lot of computational work that I'll get into, and they are paid in Bitcoin for the work. Okay. And that becomes very important when we talk about incentive alignment later. But when you hear someone say that they are mining Bitcoin, what that means is that they are doing work to help secure the Bitcoin network, and they're being paid in Bitcoin for that work. That's all Bitcoin mining is doing, having a computer do the work to help secure the network, and then you're paid in Bitcoin for that work. That is Bitcoin mining. A Bitcoin wallet is an account or an address on the Bitcoin network. It can belong to an individual or to a mining computer, and it consists of a public and a private key. So if you've heard the term Bitcoin wallet or crypto wallet before, that term can be a little bit of a misnomer because it can make you think that you have something that you are storing your Bitcoin in. If you've seen a cold wallet that's like a flash drive, it can make you think, oh, my Bitcoins are on this flash drive. And that's not how it works. The Bitcoin ledger is maintained by the Bitcoin network, and it's on the Bitcoin network that you have your wallet address. Your address, your line, if you will, in the Bitcoin ledger that has your account number and your public key and your account balance on there. That is all on the Bitcoin ledger. What you would store on a flash drive is your private key, okay? And the private key means that you are able to access that account. Public key is what anyone can see to send Bitcoin to transact with you, but the private key is what unlocks that account to be able to move Bitcoin from it if you want to. Another way to think of a Bitcoin wallet is like a mailbox that's locked. Okay, anyone can come put mail in to that mailbox if they have your address. That's what your public key is. Anyone can see your Bitcoin address and send Bitcoin to it. But only you, with the private key, can then access the Bitcoin that's been sent to that account. It's been put in that mailbox. To open that mailbox up and do anything with the mail, you have to have the key to unlock it. And in Bitcoin, that private key for your account is that key that once you have it, people can send Bitcoin to your address, your public address all day. But if you use that key to send it somewhere else, that Bitcoin is not going anywhere. No one can touch that Bitcoin except you once it arrives at your address in your wallet. Hope that makes sense. That's what the Bitcoin wallet is. And if someone says they have cold storage and they have a flash drive, they're just storing their private keys to access their wallet on that flash drive. Last, I want to talk about the blockchain itself. The blockchain is the continuously updating record of Bitcoin transactions, and it's processed in blocks. So the way the Bitcoin network works is about every 10 minutes, all of the transactions that people have submitted are bundled into one big batch or block of transactions and added to the blockchain in whatever order the miner decides to put them in. If you can think of it as the Bitcoin ledger has everyone's accounts on it, that has how much Bitcoin that they own, then all of a sudden this batch of new transactions comes in and updates a whole bunch of accounts based on people sending and receiving Bitcoin. Okay, so the transactions don't come one at a time and get processed that way. The transactions get broadcast to the Bitcoin network, and then about every 10 minutes, one of the mining computers wins a competition, essentially, to win the right to bundle all of those transactions together and then add them to the ledger, add them to the blockchain. That's why it's called a blockchain. It's a chain of blocks of transactions that's been continuously added to about every 10 minutes since 2009 when Bitcoin started. So when you hear blockchain, you can just think decentralized ledger, because it's decentralized because there's millions of computers all around the world that are updating and keeping track of the ledger. So that's what a blockchain is. It's not too complicated. Now let's talk about specifically the asset. The asset is what's being tracked by the ledger. The Bitcoin ledger is not tracking dollars or any other asset. It's just tracking Bitcoins and who has them. So if the blockchain knows the location of every Bitcoin, how is new Bitcoin generated or mined? Like we said previously, it's when the miners do work and are paid. Every miner or every computer that's a miner is competing for the privilege of publishing the next block of transactions. Okay, they're all in competition together to try and win the reward for publishing the next block of transactions. The way that miners compete is by solving a SHA-256 hashing algorithm. Basically, you can just think of it as a cryptographic puzzle that each miner is trying to solve and be the first one to solve it. And that's why Bitcoin takes so much energy. Because all of you have a laptop, a computer, when it really starts computing really hard, the fan starts whirring and blowing to cool it off and stuff. Bitcoin consumes a lot of energy because the faster that you can work through the cryptographic puzzle, the more likely it is that you will win the rights to publish that block of transactions and win Bitcoin reward. So this is why Bitcoin is so energy consumptive. With a solved hash, the miner then broadcasts the block they want to publish to the entire network, which agrees that it is valid. So the whole Bitcoin network has to come to consensus that this was the first miner to solve the puzzle, and the block that they are transmitting to us is a valid block with valid transactions in it. They're all signed properly with private keys. Now we will publish it onto the blockchain. We'll update the Bitcoin ledger with all of these transactions, and immediately the competition for the next block kicks into high gear. The miner is paid Bitcoin from network issuance. Currently, that is 3.25 Bitcoin. They are also paid all of the transaction fees because every transaction you make on the Bitcoin network, you have to pay a fee to the miners to process it. So right now, if you're the miner, you win the petition, you get 3.25 Bitcoin plus all the associated transaction fees in that bundle of transactions that you are processing. And again, as soon as this process is done, the next block competition is immediately started to be worked on. The miners immediately start trying to solve a cryptographic puzzle for the next block. The whole process starts all over again, and it happens about every 10 minutes. Now, the way that new BTC gets into the market for other people is that these high energy costs that miners have, they have to pay those. And they pay them by selling their Bitcoin. So as miners accumulate Bitcoin, they also accumulate energy bills. They then sell their Bitcoin to the market to pay those energy bills. And that's how new Bitcoin gets into the market. But there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin produced. And we'll see why here in a minute. The whole process that these miners go through is called proof of work security. There's two main kinds of security when it comes to decentralized blockchain networks. There's proof of work and there's proof of stake. Proof of work is this process where you basically have skin in the game because you have used your own money to purchase lots of equipment, and then that equipment you're having to pay high energy costs in order to get Bitcoin. So it shows that by your own investment in infrastructure that you are incentively aligned to mine Bitcoin and be a part of the Bitcoin network and be a honest participant in the Bitcoin network and not get kicked out because of trying to do fraudulent things. So let's look at Bitcoin in action. I want to put all of these pieces that we've talked about together to give you a picture of what actually happens when the Bitcoin network is working and when transactions are happening. Okay? So let's say that here, this represents the Bitcoin network, all of these millions of computers working in conjunction to secure the Bitcoin network. And they are securing the ledger, updating it, adding a block about every 10 minutes to the blockchain. Let's say we have Bob and Lisa, and Bob wants to send 1/100th of a Bitcoin to Lisa. He is feeling generous for whatever reason. He wants to send that to her. Okay. Both Bob and Lisa have public keys. They have Bitcoin addresses that anyone can see. The only other thing Bob needs is his private key, because the private key allows him to access his wallet, his account on the ledger, and sign the transaction he wants to make with it to send 0.01 Bitcoin to Lisa. So these are all the pieces that are necessary for this transaction to happen. Now, once he clicks send or execute in order to make the transaction happen, The transaction, like I said earlier, is not immediately processed. It's not processed until it gets included in a block, a bundle of transactions. Instead, it goes over here to this place called the mempool. It's short for memory pool. All of the transactions that people want to send during that 10-minute period when some miner is trying to win the cryptographic puzzle, all the transactions are just sitting there in the mempool. And the miners are going to bundle those transactions together when someone wins cryptographic puzzle. Transactions are sitting there in the mempool, and then all of a sudden, one computer solves the cryptographic puzzle and broadcasts it to the network. What happens then is that all of those transactions are wrapped up out of the mempool. They are placed in the new block on the Bitcoin blockchain, on the Bitcoin ledger. The ledger updates everyone's accounts with these new transactions that have been added to the ledger, and then Bob or Lisa can check and see that their account balances have been updated. Lisa will have an extra 100th of a Bitcoin. Bob will have one less because he sent it to Lisa. So that is the process that happens when a Bitcoin transaction takes place. It's beautiful in its simplicity. You can go down the rabbit trail on each one of these a little bit more if you want to dig into more technical detail. I've tried to keep it a little bit high level as to how all of this is working together. Here are some additional properties of the Bitcoin network that tie back to what we've talked about previously about things like certain characteristics that good money has to have, right? So how does this system provide security? Through millions of computers and incentive alignment. So again, if you're going to invest all of this money to have a Bitcoin mining machine and spend all this money on energy to try and mine Bitcoin, you're not going to waste all of that money by being a bad actor. So the fact that it takes so much upfront capital to be involved in securing the Bitcoin network secures the fact that the actors are going to be behaving in the interest of the network, because otherwise they won't get paid. Now, let's say that someone wanted to accumulate enough computing power to try and take over the Bitcoin network. First of all, that would take billions upon billions of dollars to acquire that much computing power. But then, even if you did manage to take control of the network, all the other computers have the option to just break off and keep running their own ledger. It's called a hard fork. And they would just say, oh, this bundle of transactions was done by this group of rogue computers. We're going to break off and continue to maintain an honest Bitcoin ledger. And all you would have done is made your own ledger worthless because no one would trust it. So basically, if you chose to hack or try and take over or do something malicious to where you could actually damage the Bitcoin network, there would be no value in what you had stolen. If you tried to steal all the Bitcoin doing that, no one would trust the Bitcoin network anymore, and the value of Bitcoin would plummet down to zero. So there's no way to hack or otherwise maliciously behave on the Bitcoin network to where you can steal value from it. Because if you were successful in breaking the Bitcoin network, everyone would start selling their Bitcoin. It wouldn't have any value. No one would trust it anymore. It's almost like if you could break into a bank and the minute you touched a dollar bill, it started crumbling in your hands. But there's no value here now because you broke into the vault. So that strong incentive alignment means that there's more value in you just being an honest participant of the Bitcoin network than there is trying to be malicious. Far more value. So anyone just behaving in their own best interest is just going to be a good actor on the Bitcoin network. Incentive alignment is very important. How does this system provide censorship resistance and avoid state capture, which are a couple other important things that we've talked about? Through worldwide decentralization, even of leadership. It doesn't matter what a single country may want to do to or with Bitcoin. The computers are decentralized around the world. The Bitcoin network is going to keep functioning and ticking regardless of how many world powers may want to shut it down. Okay? It's decentralized everywhere. You can't stop it. And in this way, it pops the monopoly bubble that governments have over their citizens, forcing them to use whatever currency the government is issuing. Now people have a decentralized opt-out their government can't control. And even the leadership is decentralized because Satoshi Nakamoto has vanished. He, she, they have been vanished for over a decade. The Bitcoin network was rolling, functioning, doing fine. They disappeared sometime in 2012, haven't been heard from since. They haven't touched their wallet since then on the Bitcoin network. So there's not a single point of leadership either that could be captured, tortured, anything along those lines. So it's decentralized in the most complete way possible, in the sense of it's at this point completely driven by the participants, by the community. There's no single figurehead that you can try and coerce to try and do anything. Okay. So the decentralization level of Bitcoin is unparalleled. It's fantastic. And how does the system keep Bitcoin scarce? Because like we talked about, scarcity is an important part of being a sound money. If you have inflation going on, that's not. So how is Bitcoin kept scarce if all these computers are doing all this work and getting paid, it's always being issued? How does Bitcoin stay scarce? And the answer is it's through timed halvenings of the block reward, which happen about every 4 years, all the way down to zero around the year 2140. So every 4 years or so, the amount of the block reward is cut in half. When Bitcoin first started in 2009, block reward was 50 Bitcoin. And then it went down to 25, and then 12 and a half, and then 6 and a quarter. 3.125 Bitcoin is now the block reward. So that's going to keep getting cut in half all the way down until 2140. Okay. So at that point, or progressively as we go along, transaction fees have to take over. So Bitcoin over time is reliant on people using it for more and more transactions and paying those transaction fees so that miners are still incentivized to use the network. And that's actually been one of the bigger questions for Bitcoin as it's gone forward is transaction volumes actually need to significantly pick up in order to keep Bitcoin secure. And there's a lot of avenues forward, it seems like, that can lead to that, but it hasn't happened yet. So people are trusting and hoping that over time, Bitcoin transactions are going to go up far more than they have so far. Because right now, people tend to use it more as digital gold than they do for actually transacting. They buy it and they hold it. They don't really transact with it very much. So that is something that has to change. Somehow the Bitcoin network has to start being used for transactions in order to replace the subsidy that the network is giving out continuously. So over time, that's how that's going to happen. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is how you can exchange your fiat for Bitcoin. Now that you understand the purpose of sound money, why Bitcoin was invented, and how the Bitcoin network works and how it is kept secure and scarce. If you are wanting to purchase Bitcoin, how does that happen? How do you exchange your government fiat money for Bitcoin? So the Bitcoin network is permissionless. Anyone can spin up a wallet. You today can go and launch yourself a Bitcoin wallet. Very simple, plenty of applications available to help you do this. You can have a wallet. Once you have a wallet, you have a public address that can have coins sent to it, and you store the private keys to that address. It is yours. No one else can touch it. And fiat to Bitcoin exchanges happen through crypto exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken. Here's how that process works. You would open an account on Coinbase, let's say. You would connect your normal bank to that account on Coinbase or send a wire transfer to that account. So now your account with Coinbase is either connected to a checking account or is funded with a wire transfer and you have US dollars there ready to go. You can then purchase Bitcoin through Coinbase. At this point, though, it is custodied by them. So what's actually going on in the background here? What's happening is Coinbase has a lot of Bitcoin wallets, and then they have their own accounting ledger system within Coinbase saying, okay, in this Coinbase wallet, John has purchased 3 Bitcoin. We've got his 3 Bitcoin here. We've got Sally's 2 Bitcoin here. We've got his 1 Bitcoin here. Coinbase has sold you Bitcoin and is just keeping track of the fact that you own X number of Bitcoin that they have in their wallets. So you're not really holding Bitcoin at that point. Coinbase is holding it for you. You can think of when you buy a gold ETF or something along those lines where the gold is not actually in your hands. You don't possess it. It's just a piece of paper. That's what this is like at this point. Your Bitcoin is custodied by someone else, like gold can be custodied by someone else. And really, for Bitcoin to do what you want it to do and provide that censorship resistance, that freedom of transaction that you want to be holding your Bitcoin. So once you've purchased Bitcoin from Coinbase, you would set up your own Bitcoin wallet if you haven't already with that public and private key. And then you can transfer your Bitcoin from the exchange to your wallet. And at that point, you are custodying your own Bitcoin. You have complete control over it. It is in a wallet that you set up. No one can touch it who doesn't have the private key. Only you have. There's not a thing that anyone else can do about it. So when people talk about self-custodying your own Bitcoin, this is what they're talking about. Exchanges, crypto exchanges should be viewed, I heard a good analogy once, that they should be viewed as public restrooms. Get in, get out. Do your business. Make your purchases, get out, and get it on chain, get it into your own wallet. Because not your keys, not your coins is always true. If you don't hold the private keys to where Bitcoin is being stored, you don't own it. Coinbase or Kraken or someone else owns it at that point. It is genuinely owned by someone else. Okay? You don't control it. Coinbase has complete control over your Bitcoin or any other crypto until you move it to your wallet. And anything can be done. So you're trusting again. You're bringing trust assumptions back into the picture, trusting that exchange to behave honorably, to steward your crypto. Purpose of crypto is self-sovereignty, is for you to have control over your money permissionlessly, censorship resistant, all those things. Worldwide transactions, you want those qualities in your hands. So I hope that has given you a really good, solid understanding of how the Bitcoin network works in a way that makes it secure, sound, decentralized, permissionless, censorship-resistant money that anyone in the world can use that's wanting to escape from the government fiat regime that they are currently under. If you have any questions about that I can answer further, please leave a comment below. If this has been helpful to you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so that more people can find this helpful information. I will look forward to seeing you all in Module 4.